I'm Nick from the Beat to Beat Foundation. I'm just a guy in the street who over 14 years researched, tried, experimented with myself and overcame my pre and type 2 diabetes. And I want to take you through how I overcame my type 2 diabetes, because 14 years ago I was told it wasn't possible, and I was told it had fairly well been onward march towards type 2 diabetes and then possibly insulin, etc, etc, and it wasn't a very pleasant experience. Since then, a lot of people have challenged the thinking. A lot of people have emerged from the grounds of medicine in particular with different views on type 2 diabetes. The difficulty, which is why I want you to have a guy in the street perspective, the difficulty is that if you don't happen to walk in on one of those doctors or one of those medics, and they are few and far between, you will still be given the old advice, which is that you should put a 25 to 35% carbs on your plate, and that it's an ultimate journey and it'll end in amputations and God knows what. And I want the guy in the street to tell you, the guy in the street as well, that that's not the way it has to be. I was pre-diabetic for about 4 years, and then for 6 years I'd been diabetic, when 4 years ago I was, I'll say, fat shamed on social media by this particular clip. And it's fair to say I used to look something like that, but now I look more like this. So there's a couple of screenshots there to give you a before and after my overcoming type 2 diabetes. How did I do it? Well, for the first 6 years of being diabetic, type 2 diabetic, diagnosed, it was a traditional case of more tablets and more tablets, and going back every 6 months and loading more layers of tablets on and maxing them out and getting to a point where I was being prescribed insulin. And at that point, along with the social media phase, probably become famous for that, at that point I took matters into my own hands. I'd long held the view that diet and exercise were a way to overcome type 2 diabetes, possibly even reverse it. The thinking just wasn't there when I first started thinking in those ways, if you like. We didn't have the Dr. Jason Fungs, we didn't have the Professor Tim Noakes, and we'll screenshot a few of those in a minute to see the groundswell of evidence that's coming out now.
Is type 2 diabetes a reversible disease?
So I could reel off the medication I was on, metformin, standard maximum dose of 2,000 milligrams a day, and sitagliptin and Foxorgia, and then blood pressure stuff and heart stuff, and oh, it just went on. And what was happening was they were building up the layers of an onion, that each layer of medication was there to treat a symptom and not to cure the actual diabetes. And so I started doing a whole load of reading, and you'll see some other of my videos where I'm surrounded by walls of books, and believe me, there's been a lot of research and a lot of reading, but I did it back to front, inside out. I didn't do it in a straight line. The reality is that it took a lot longer than it needed to, and now you've got people online, and we'll go to them in a minute, I'll screenshot them, but you've got people online saying, look, you can do this in 3 months, you can do it in 6 months, and then people go off and do it, and then you've got you've got testimonials on the sites saying, it took me 3 months, it took me 6 months, a year ago I was full of diabetes, my A1C was up at 10 to 15 and now it's at 4. Also great stories, there's so much evidence there, but it's still a thin thread compared to the number of people who are overweight and heading towards type 2 diabetes, or those who've already got pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, and really do need to overcome it to prevent those symptoms getting worse, because it will ultimately, one of the symptoms will ultimately kill them. So in a sort of random manner, I started thinking about how I was going to do more exercise. Quite clear that I needed to get fitter. For me, I needed a purpose, and one thing led to another, and I ended up doing swimming training. And here's some pictures of me swimming training. And that certainly helped. The exercise side of it, you know, what started as a length at a time, 5 lengths, 10 lengths became a kilometre, 2 kilometres, and then I was doing charity swims for 10 kilometres, and that was really good for me. And a lot of weight started to drop off. But throughout that period, the numbers weren't getting any better. They just weren't getting any better, which is the problem. On the diet side, it was the real meal revolution, really. Here's a screenshot here, Professor Tim Noakes. I read that book and that leapt out at me, because he had been a classic carbohydrate fueled athlete for all of his life, and then he got type 2 diabetes. When you look at him, he's skinny as a rake, but in actual fact he's asking himself, well, why did I get it? And I get it, totally. So I took on board a lot of his advice in terms of keto, banting, low carb, high fat, and again, weight dropped. That was the weight transformation for me. We were still knocking at the door of insulin, maxed out on all the tablets, and diabetic doctors and nurses, I would say, not hell-bent, but insistent that insulin was the only way that they were going to get this under control. And I'm not getting your diabetes under control, it's just masking the symptoms. But, you know, we're not here to push buttons and create controversy, but that's how it is. So here I was, 6 months from insulin, and I said no. I was there with my good lady wife Gillian, and we both went, no, not doing this, not happening, absolutely not. I have another friend who is type 2 and had been prescribed insulin, which I think is quite controversial, but there you go. He's type 2 on insulin, and he was always adamant. He said, Nick, if you ever go on insulin, you'll never get off it. Resonated with me, rang in my head, and I thought, we're not going there. So I made a deal with Nurse Insulin, as I call her. I said, I've got an idea, give me 6 months, and if I've got the numbers back down, then we're going my way, and if I haven't, we're going your way. And it's kind of a deal, really. It wasn't as dramatic as that, but she said, yeah, right, 6 months, whatever you're gonna do, go and do it. And in that 6 months, what I did was I put the two together. I increased the swimming. That's when I was up to my 10Ks and my really, not competitive, but endurance stuff. And the low carb, high fat, I absolutely stuck to it rigidly. And I didn't know what was happening with the numbers. But it was 6 hard months of, it wasn't random trial and error, but it was trial and error because I didn't have the numbers. You get the numbers every 3 months of how your A1C is going. I didn't have that. So it was kind of a bit of a blind flight. And we went and had the bloods taken, and then went back with my wife, again, as always, and literally before we sat down, Nurse Insulin said, I don't know what you've been doing, but whatever it is, get out there and do more of it, because my numbers were collapsing. So that was a breakthrough. Unfortunately for me, and I've told you that it took 14 years to get over all of this, unfortunately for me, I got a bit complacent to that point, and I'd done what people typically do. I'd done the diet and exercise, I'd got a result, and I was back to the party. Shouldn't have done it, shouldn't have let it happen. Job got in the way, life got in the way, and everything. And I was there, still knocking on insulin's door, still with numbers, not doing so great. Now bear in mind, no single book was written at this point, I don't believe, leading me, guiding me through what it was. There was a patchwork quilt of medics, doctors, nurses, dietitians, all coming from slightly different angles, and a groundswell of evidence was starting to build that you could reverse type 2 diabetes and I could overcome my type 2 diabetes, but how and in what order wasn't really laid out to me. And we'll come on to that at the end of this. Back on track with a couple of seasons, open water swimming, healthy, fit, low carb, high fat. One of my colleagues, I say famously, said that when I was becoming fat adapted, i.e. burning fat rather than burning carbs for energy, he said, I really thought that you were dying. You know, it's not easy, this, and I didn't appreciate that at the time, and it does things to you. It's a hard journey. Anything with a result like overcoming type 2 diabetes is a journey worth treading. There's no doubt about it. Again, I was doing this all back to front, all out of order. No one was coaching me, no one was guiding me, no one was mentoring me. And unfortunately, my numbers were still borderline insulin. Where it did all change was when I found what we now call the third step. I've got a 1, 2, 3. I've got a 1, 2, 3 navigation route for people to get away from pre and type 2 diabetes. After looking back through my 14 years, I've sort of shuffled the pack and put it in an order that is much quicker than 14 years. And step 3, it was like, well, there's something wrong. Why are we doing all this diet and exercise and we're not cured? Answer that. Couldn't answer it. And I did some really deep research, and I came out at a cellular level with the fact that the insulin resistance, which is kind of the last bit that the medics really look at, if I'm perfectly honest, the insulin resistance of the cells was preventing glucose getting to the organs and waste getting out. And in actual fact, when you see people having amputations and getting very, very ill with diabetic symptoms, it's simply that you can't feed these organs. This arm isn't getting fed, so it gets chopped off, so's that foot. The sensory nerves, the nerves go, then the muscles waste, you're immune to pain, and it just happens. Limbs literally chopped off before they drop off. It was quite clear that I could control my type 2 diabetes, but could I overcome it? Well, I did that in one short, sharp shock. And what I actually did was I went on to a raw diet, uncooked, largely vegetarian and no refined foods whatsoever. The research had really gone full circle, and the damage that these refined foods have done to your cells at an absolute cellular level, microscopic level, is just unbelievable. We've been buying diabetes off our grocery store shelves for 50 to 100 years. And if you're prone to insulin resistance, like the diabetic population is, you're going to get caught. When you go down the grocery store, you don't know if you're insulin resistant or not, but you sure enough know it when you get diagnosed. So I went through this kind of last step, if you like, and that eased it all for me. That meant I could, within 2 weeks, I could halve my metformin, and I started to feel fantastic. I have no symptoms of type 2 diabetes whatsoever anymore. I get no rolling sugars, and that's because my glucose management system in its entirety is working. So 3 simple steps. The first one, which I didn't think of at the time, is get your head in the right place. Get your head into a place that's similar to somebody who's overcoming an addiction. Get yourself there and you're on the right sort of plane. Secondly, yes, diet and exercise, it'll get your blood glucose down, it'll get your fat down, it'll get toxins out of your body, and it'll start to make you more responsive to the good work that you're going to do. But you've got to go that final step, otherwise you will just be a diabetic who's controlled, not one who's overcome the diabetes. So the third step was the fix broken cells and organs. And that's where the cell walls that have become stiff and sticky are denied the last of their toxins, the last of their refined oils, sugars, flours, wheat, grains, all of those things. And they slowly metamorphose back into being soft and spongy and permeable. The insulin delivers the glucose to the cell walls, and it's actually allowed to go in. Now there's another dimension to this, because it's possible that we can improve type 1 diabetics as well. But more of that in a separate video. I'll leave you with a screenshot of all of these people who are coaching and training people at a medical level to overcome diabetes. As I say, good luck getting hold of one, because they're in very high demand and there's very few of them. But it is changing, but there are still 700 million diabetics in the world, and 5 million of them every year die of diabetic related symptoms. So in a nutshell, what took me 14 years should probably have taken 14 months or 14 weeks, and I've given you a nutshell of the journey in about 14 minutes. It's not rocket science, it just needs to be done in the right order. And so when I came to change jobs, if you like, I decided that I wanted to do some good for the world. I decided that if I could, I would make it my life's work to help pre and type 2 diabetics to overcome their type 2 diabetes. And we set up the Beat to Beat Foundation, which is geared around my journey back from insulin, which you can get hold of online for free. My journey back from insulin, which you can get hold of online for free. We're not charging money for that sort of stuff. We don't charge a lot of money for anything. We're a non-profit foundation.